Good morning. I'm Dr. Tasha Prieto with Prismatic Services, and I'm here to review the work of our team. In about 30 minutes or so, I set the timer, otherwise I would likely share as much as I can about what we have learned on this journey since embarking on this study February, March into April timeframe. First, a little bit about the project. What you see on the screen is the text of the legislative mandate that created this current consolidation study for Asheville Buncombe. This is the text from House Bill 142, signed into law by the governor at the end of September in 2023. I'd like to point out two things with this. The body volunteered to do this work. The staff were voluntold. In this case, that's not true. Everyone in this room was voluntold to provide this work. And that said, even so, we received tremendous cooperation from ACS, BCS, and the county in completing this work, and we're very appreciative of that. The other words I'd like to point out are including the potential economic and educational impact. The mandate does not prescribe how the study is to be done. It does not provide the framework. Specifically, it doesn't say, which counts for more, economic impact or educational impact, left unsaid. So a little bit about how do we go about this project. First, we assembled a team of great consultants. We had 11 consultants on this project, 5 of whom have previously worked within North Carolina school systems, all of whom have been associated with agencies over the course of their careers. Within the team that you see on the left side of the slide, we devoted 3 personnel to the finance aspects. This was a tricky project in terms of how the finances might shake out with consolidation, without consolidation, and looking at the current financial status of each one of the systems. We then had a consultant over each of the various functional areas, most of them from our office in Charlotte. At this point, I'd like to point out that one of the hallmarks of Prismatic's projects is our adherence to 7 key values, one of which is being bold. We aren't interested in supporting the status quo unless the status quo is achieving extraordinary student outcomes. And over the years, various Prismatic consultants have been on teams that have recommended bold things such as closing 39 of Houston's 280 schools. We made that recommendation in 2019. We've recommended top to bottom reorganizations of many central office structures. We've recommended the elimination of literally thousands of unnecessary positions across our 300-plus projects and in our work as consultants before that. One statewide study where I worked on years and years ago, we made bold recommendations that literally led to death threats. And I'm not saying this to make the work sound glamorous, because it decidedly is not glamorous. I am making the point to detail and to underscore the value that Prismatic places on making bold recommendations and to help provide a proper background to frame our ultimate recommendation on this study. This slide provides the RFP areas that we were to review. You can see they cover really soup to nuts within a school system, everything from governance, the school board, policies and procedures, how we play the game, all the way down through facilities, business operations, child nutrition, and transportation. So how did we frame this project? In the absence of a legislative mandate that said, do it like this, we went to the literature and developed a framework. In developing that framework, we looked at a couple of key things. We went back as far as we could with this. We started with Sharon Schaller's 1986 work in North Carolina. We looked at merger studies completed in 2011 for the City Schools Consortium, also a North Carolina study. We looked at the work done in 2018 for Columbus County and Whiteville City Schools, as well as a number of other ones that had lesser bearing on what we came up with. In the end, we quickly developed a framework that centered on 3 questions. What does the research say? And why? People ask, why do we start with this? Because oftentimes what the research says is not something that is popular, but it's still what the research says and it's the right thing to do. I'm often standing up here arguing for something that the research emphatically states is the right thing to do, but locally we're a little hesitant to do it. So we look at what the research says. What do constituents want? This is important in the sense that not only do they have a responsibility to weigh in on how they want education to happen within their area, but recognizing that if we recommended consolidation, it needs to be something people are willing to do. And would consolidation improve things? And then the things is all of those functional areas that we looked at. So we left that sort of open-ended for the consultants, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. Then, some numbers for you, for people who like numbers. You've heard the phrase, American runs on Duncan, Prismatic runs on data. We run on a lot of data. We began this project with an initial data request list to each one of the entities, ACS and BCS, that included 221 items. That's all we asked for. In response to that, we got over 1,100 documents from the combined entities. And then we asked for additional data as the study progressed. We completed 168 interviews. That included interviews with district staff, elected officials, community leaders, and community leaders covered a gamut of elected officials and leaders of a total of 222 attendees. We visited 35 schools, mostly to observe school nutrition and transportation and take a look at facilities. We also completed some interviews in those schools. We administered surveys to high school students. We met with the local project team 4 times over the course of the project to discuss the data, to discuss impressions of data, and to get direction as the study progressed. And in total, we spent 87 days on site. So who did we hear from on this project? This slide provides a compilation of who we heard from, as well as the participation method, the time frame, and the number of respondents. Interviews began in May, went all the way through September. 124 unique individuals interviewed within that group of ACS, BCS, the county, community organizations, and elected officials. We did focus groups. We did focus groups with a list of invitees developed in concert with the county and ACS and BCS. That total of 55, you can see that they were broken out across various types, interest group types, and those happened in August. The 10 community forums I mentioned had a total of 222 participants, and that did not count the press or the people from ACS, BCS, or the county who were there. And those 222 people represented a vast cross-section. We had everything from older citizens without students to a really vocal, enthusiastic group of high school students at one of them. So we feel like we covered the gamut there. And then finally, we developed and fielded 4 online surveys. Those happened in the month of September. You can see the number of participants there. We had very healthy response rates from high school students, parents, and ACS and BCS staff. We also had a healthy response rate, all small, as those surveys were fielded and completed just before the hurricane. So what are our conclusions and our recommendations? We pulled together, organized, and analyzed a search say. We took a look at the studies that had been done previously in ACS and BCS, and y'all have had more than a few of those done. There were 10 reports that we looked at. The recommendations were consolidation, consolidation, consolidation. After that, the studies were generally against consolidation or didn't take a stand. And one thing that I'd like to point out that it also bears on this study is that in some cases the reasons for or against consolidation were really time specific. What was going on in the community, what was happening in one system that wasn't happening in the other system, and so they are really time-bound recommendations. That is also true of this. While we have attempted to project into the future where we're going, and I'll talk about that in a minute, in terms of population and things like that, this is a decision and recommendation made for where we are now and where it looks like we are going in the future. We took a look at the broader research base. And the broader research base included peer-reviewed studies. It also included other items. Since this was not my dissertation, we were allowed to look at things that were not peer-reviewed if we felt like they offered valuable information. And the research largely says size does matter. We're talking about school district size. Size does matter. But if you read into the studies, and not just the abstracts, what you find is that they're talking about size matters really only when you're going from tiny to small. Tiny, what is tiny? School districts of less than 500 students. What is small in a lot of the literature? School districts of about 1,500 students, okay? That's where you get the biggest bang for your buck in saying, yeah, size matters. After that, the literature points to, it goes in a number of different directions. Economies of scale. This is one that is a common assumption It goes hand in hand with the idea that all government is bloated and bureaucratic, but if we're a bigger government agency, they'll tend to be small among school districts. In fact, they point to what is called a U-shaped cost function, meaning that really tiny school systems, again, those of 500 or less, do suffer from lack of purchasing power, diseconomies of scale, because even though they're really small, they still need to have a transportation director. But at the other end, really large districts also suffer from diseconomies of scale, because as you get larger, you need more middle management kinds of things. And then we took a look at North Carolina specific research on consolidation. And there are a couple of those that are recent, as well as some older studies. Some of it peer reviewed, some of it not. But in terms of the general gist of that body of work, it does not show positive changes in academic outcomes and only little cost savings. And so the most recent one from this body of research is Dr. Chen's work in 2023, which looked at consolidations across time in North Carolina from a really unique perspective. And what he found was that consolidation had no impact on the academic outcomes he was looking at. And the academic outcomes he was looking at included graduation rates and later youth incarceration. So the second one's not typically something we in K-12 look at, but he made a good argument for why it was a good thing to look at as an academic outcome. He did not look at grade level progression or grade level proficiencies, those kinds of things, for a couple of different reasons. So what he found was consolidation had no impact on those two academic outcomes. The other thing that he found was that it did have some impact on reducing costs. He specifically stated that it would reduce instructional costs by about 2% and district support services costs by about 8%. Sounds like great numbers. I'd love an 8%, right? However, if you look at the details of the study, what it shows is that he looked at it over a period of time, over 12 years, and he took, so this school system consolidated in 1982, this school system consolidated in 1990, look at 12 years on top of each of those dates, lay them back on top of each other so that the year zeros and the year ones are aligned, and you get some cost savings looking at it that way, looking at about years 6, 7, 8, 9, that are statistically significant. What he is unable to accommodate or account for in his model is the larger economic picture that's going on with education. And those of us in K-12 know that if there's one thing that's certain, is that funding ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows into pretty predictable cycles, which are roughly equivalent to 8 to 10 years. And so disaggregating those two effects is really not possible with the way that he did the study, but it did show some cost savings. So I put little cost savings in there, and I think that's an accurate representation both of his work and other work in North Carolina. So that was the research base. So then we looked at what constituents want. And for those of you who don't like numbers, you can skip chapter 3 of the report entirely and just look at this. Wrapping up everything the constituents said to us over the course of the study, they said, yes, go for consolidation if it will improve these outcomes: student success, student well-being, academic quality, academic options, school life for students, and in some cases, retaining staff positions. So the first 3 columns: interviews, focus groups, forums, qualitative data. Don't have any numbers for you, but those were the things that they identified as being most important to them. So if we came to the conclusion that consolidation would improve student well-being, interviewees said, yes, go for it. On the right side of the chart, you have the survey results. We asked all of those groups to identify for us what they thought should be the deciding factors in going for consolidation or not going for consolidation. These are their top 3 choices overall, with one exception down at the bottom. And you'll see that with the exception of the bottom line, everything is about students. Is it going to make it better for students? Is it going to be more options? Is school life going to be better? Are they going to have more mental health? Are they going to be more successful? Okay. Saving money was not choices in any of the community forums. It was not in the top 3 choices on any of the online surveys that we did. The only survey where if it saves money was selected by a majority of respondents was the community survey. There, 56% said that saving money should definitely be considered in assessing consolidation feasibility. That percentage went to 66% if we looked at the respondents who are 56 years and older. But on the subsequent question, when we asked them to rank the top 3 choices of everything that they selected, it was not the number one. Run and improve things. And here I asked the consultants to look at that 2 different abilities, or if they were looking at transportation. The question was comparing ACS and BC, knocking it out of the ballpark, or the other one's struggling to get off on the field. Is there something really innovative going on in one that isn't going on in the other? Are they equitable? Are we offering true equity in those systems? I also asked them to look at, would there be financial, operation, or equity benefits consolidation in this area? So within transportation, would there be benefits in consolidating? Within food services, within instruction, all of those areas. And then we also asked them some more specific questions that responded directly to what was in the RFP. This work consumed a large part of our consultants' time. So what did we find? We found that neither ACS nor BCS is far outpacing the other or outpacing state averages on things like EOCs, EOGs, or graduation rates. For county people, EOCs, end of course exams, EOGs, end of grade exams, graduation rates, hope that's self-explanatory. While they are making lots of efforts and doing good work in improving in those areas, neither one of them is far outpacing the other. And we did not find that. Both ACS and BCS are struggling with achievement gaps. While in talking with the community, it was far, far better known that ACS is struggling with an achievement gap than BCS, the data show that both are struggling with achievement gaps. Neither one of them has figured out that conundrum. And I will say, in their defense, that that is a difficult challenge that most K-12 entities face and struggle with. We found that neither ACS nor BCS was overstaffed in their central offices. And again, we looked at this at a department by department level. Finally, and this becomes a real key point when we get to the end, consolidation would require a consistent approach to salaries, substantial differences between how ACS and BCS approach salaries. There are definite substantial differences in how they do supplements for positions. And so consolidation, we would have to have a consistent approach to that. Then we looked at some environmental considerations, right? With the idea that would consolidation help us meet the challenges of the environmental things that are coming. The first one we looked at is enrollment. One of the things we heard a lot about was those charter schools are eating our lunch and taking all our kids. Not exactly true, right? Between 2019 and 2020 to 2023-24, enrollment in K-12 is down 5% across the county. We are losing students overall. They're not just going to charter schools. We are losing students overall. And what you see there is BCS and ACS in the green. You can see the bands, they vary a little bit, but at that 40,000 mark and the line that's slowly shrinking back to the 35,000 mark, we're losing students overall. Where are we losing? Who's winning and who's losing in this game? It is true that in the last 5-year period, charter school enrollment is up 17%. So some portion of your students are going to charter schools, and the result is that ACS and BCS are both losing enrollment, right? But on top of that, we're losing enrollment overall. And that is something that is a larger demographic worry point. Looking at population overall, and this is not going to be pleasant news, by 2025, we're growing, absolutely. Buncombe County is going to grow by 28%. That is fantastic. However, the growth is not proportionate. The proportion of those ages 5 to 18, we're only going to grow by 8% between now and 2050. So if you're not a numbers person, here's how that works out. Between now and 2050, we're going to gain 115 new students each year, county-wide. And that 115 kids, is some of them are going to go to charters, some of them are going to homeschool, some of them are going to private school, some will go to ACS, and some will go to BCS. For that reason, we feel that level enrollment projections, status quo staying the same, is about the best case scenario for ACS and BCS. Yes, there are pockets of growth in some areas, but the larger demographic trend is slowly declining enrollment. And so we asked ourselves the question, would consolidation help this? Well, Are they so small that one is now insolvent? Is it infeasible to continue operations? The answer to that is no. Would consolidation create one system? Yes. Would consolidation be an effective defense against declining enrollment? No. Would consolidation help defend against the loss of students to a smaller educational environment? If that is true, it'd be nonsensical for us to go, well, we'll create a bigger school system and then they'll come back, right? So not a convincing argument that consolidation solves our enrollment challenge. That challenge remains whether you consolidate or you don't. Then we looked at facilities and asked ourselves, would consolidation assist with the facilities? One of the things that is of concern is that both school systems have underutilized capacity. What you see on this map, the red dots are underutilized schools. Those are based on best practices calculations. And so at the simple level, you build a school that's supposed to hold 500 students. If you only have 250 students enrolled, you're underutilizing. It's actually a little more complicated than that, but let's just go with that example. Then, combined with what you see for the demographic projections into the future, it becomes more and more of a concern as time goes on. There are very few schools within best practices utilization levels. All ACS facilities are currently underutilized. 37 of 45 BCS schools are currently underutilized. Empty seats cost a lot. If you think about it, we have two schools. We built them for 500 kids 20 years ago when we had 500 kids in each area. Now each school only has 250 kids. You can see quickly that it's not just about facilities, right? Each one of those schools has a principal. If we only had one school, we'd have one principal. Each one of those schools probably has a guidance counselor. If we only had one school, we'd probably only, hopefully, down, right? Facilities cost money, not just in the drywall and the roofing. So out of the about 37,000 seats that the combined systems have, you're somewhere between 4,600 and 9,000 empty seats right now. Demographics predict that will get worse. Would consolidation help that? Potentially. One of the things that's in the details of Dr. Chin's work is that in the immediate aftermath of a number of consolidations, facilities costs dropped quite a bit. So from year 0 to year 2, facilities costs dropped. That seems to indicate, and some other research indicates, that consolidation was used as a way to close schools. Is that the only way to close schools? No. Each one of the systems could address this issue on their own. Is it only going to be possible if we consolidate? Again, the answer is no. Each system could do this on their own, but it remains an environmental consideration. Finally, we looked at boundaries. Those of you who live here recognize that the purple is BCS, the yellow is a weird blue is the city of Asheville, which in no way coincides with ACS's borders. And so, at the top level, at the macro level, okay, maybe this doesn't, look so bad, and this is not something we should care about. But if you get down to the the micro level, sorry. Here's a neighborhood in the city of Asheville. The details of it don't matter other than this is a real picture. These are houses, various streets. There's nothing that differentiates this except one lucky person has a pool, right? Overlay this on a map of the ACS and the city of Asheville boundaries, and here's what you have. The hash mark parcels are zoned for ACS schools. The non-hash marked houses are zoned for BCS. As one of the interviewees that I met with said, it looks like Swiss cheese. And it does. It looks like Swiss cheese. We have multiple maps of this. This is not a one-off random place. This is the map I showed you previously is contained within this. And so it is something that is of concern, particularly since it appears often that the discussion about consolidation for ACS and BCS comes up because the systems are not the same size. There is a reason they're not the same size. Swiss cheese is a reason they're not closer in size. We'd be moving on to Manchego or Gouda. But is that the only way to address this issue? And the answer is no. This is a county issue, right? This could be resolved by the county and the city as opposed to forcing consolidation on the school systems. So, conclusions. One of the reasons that we look at consolidation is because there's a crisis. You don't see a lot about that in our report because we pretty quickly came to the conclusion neither ACS nor BCS is in financial or other crisis. We found that there's no compelling evidence that consolidation would improve student performance, right? And this is from the research base. This is from what we see on the ground with the school systems. While they're both working to improve student performance, neither one is far outpacing the other that we say, okay, well, we should jump on that train together. We found no compelling evidence that consolidation would substantially reduce costs. We did take a hard look at what would be the combined consolidated central office that consumes a large portion of the words in Chapter 4. And we came to wrapping up all the department by department numbers that we came to, we could achieve probably about a 0.8% reduction in central office costs through consolidation. Not a compelling number in my mind, given the swag factor that has to be considered in that. I would offer to you that oftentimes physics comes into play with central offices, right? At the school level, but then somebody's got to manage how that money gets spent at the school level, and that results in some more spending at the central office level. Research supports that, that there is that we adhere to the principles of physics, and entropy happens. We found there's little current collaboration between ACS and BCS. Why is this important? This is important because if consolidation is determined, is mandated, then the county should be aware that the discovery process is going to take longer than perhaps you would assume. These are not two entities that work hand in glove, from top to many times in our interviews, we'd say, well, what do you think about how the other one does this, whatever it is that this person works on? And the answer was, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I don't pay attention to them. So we would have to come to a level of much greater collaboration as part of the discovery process if consolidation were mandated. There are strong local perceptions of culture differences that would need to be overcome. If there was one word I heard on this study, it was culture, culture, culture. People define culture differently. People get range, but the perceptions of cultural differences between the two systems would be something that would need to be overcome in consolidation. And that again would indicate decided over that actual project, those actual projects. 2 years is about the time frame for implementation if everybody's willing, ready, and wants to do it. Probably longer to finish consolidation. And then finally, again, going back to what constituents said, there's really little local support for consolidation. And we looked at it multiple ways. We asked the question multiple ways, and we really pushed the idea of, what about the great things that we might get from consolidation? And I think that if I could characterize the thoughts of the public as they looked at consolidation, some of them were tentatively in favor of consolidation because, as one person said to me, things aren't working great now, so why not try something new? And while I personally agree with it, if it's not working, let's try something new, consolidation is a very large weapon to wield against something that just doesn't feel like it's working as well as it could be. And so little local support for the idea of true consolidation in the sense of, yes, there are the real tangible benefits that we could see from this that can only be achieved with consolidation. So with that, we came to our recommendation. The project only requested a recommendation, which is why there's no S on there, which is really unusual for me to see. We did make a few ancillary recommendations aside from that. Those are detailed at the end of Chapter 6. They relate to those environmental considerations. But the thing we were asked to recommend or not recommend on is consolidation. And at the end of the day, we did not recommend consolidation of ACS and BCS. At this point, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. And I know that Heather is going to lead us in some discussion, and I think in the meantime, we will take some questions. Can we go back to 2 slides previous, please, on the conclusions? Can you share with us a bit about neither district being in a financial crisis? I think there's always a lot of conversation during budget season that both districts are really struggling financially, and that the county portion to supplement what the General Assembly doesn't give our school districts needs to be increased. When you talk about looking at a financial crisis, What did you review to come to that final conclusion?
So we could talk all day about whether or not North Carolina adequately funds education from the state level. We're currently potentially no federal funding for schooling, which yields, depending on the school system, 8 to 12, maybe even 15% in some of the did. Absolutely. One of the things that is true of both ACS and BCS is that within the pool of North Carolina, they are more funded than other school systems, and that comes from the local support that is provided. I recognize, and the team recognizes, that for county, it's a difficult thing sometimes, and this wasn't heard in this project, but in another North Carolina project we did. The counties often feel, education is the biggest thing that they fund. It's the biggest portion of their budget. And then they have, in this case, in this other district, that balance between all of the responsibilities and recognizing that education is the biggest thing that is funded. But we did not find that to be true. They're not the lowest locally funded in the state by any means. Do they struggle? Yes, but all school systems struggle with finances, and it is because we have high expectations, as we should. We want every child to graduate. We want every child to read on grade level by grade 3. We want business doing that. They're not brains on sticks. We have to attend to getting them to school. That's transportation. Sure, they're fed. That's child nutrition. We have to make sure they're safe and secure. We have to take care of a lot of other things, mental health needs, before we can get to the let's educate the brain piece. And so it's a very expensive business. And most of budgets in K-12, and this is true of ACS and BCS, is wrapped up in salaries and personnel. More than 80% in ACS and BCS. I think the figures are 82 and 84% respectively. I may have that backwards. But you now want to also make sure that people have a living wage and are happy coming to work, because if they're not happy employees, the magic in the classroom is much less likely to happen. But in terms of financial crisis, out of fund balance, and we can't pay our bills, and we can't make payroll. That's happened in a couple of school systems. Those should be consolidated because obviously something's really wrong. Are they facing a funding cliff with the potential loss of federal funding? Perhaps. With whatever happens at the state level? Perhaps. But the things that the local system can control, the county is funding education to a great degree here. Would I, if I were superintendent, would I not ask for more every year? Of course. But they are not facing impending financial doom. Neither one of them is out of fund balance. And we did look at the demographics this way as well. Looking into the future, is one of them, the smaller one, obviously ACS, likely to be in financial crisis? And we came to the conclusion no.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Members of the board?
I had one quick question. So the constituent feedback says that they really supported consolidation only if it really improves student success or student well-being.
Yes, sir.
And then the parent and student surveys I found very interesting, because over 80% of the students responded that my school is a good place to learn. Mm-hmm. Over 90% of the parents said ACS and BCS are good places to learn with great teachers as well. So my question is, we already have a fairly high satisfaction rate among parents and students. And so I can understand why, if we only want to merge if we're going to see big outcomes on improvements in student success, but we already have this great perception of what's going on in our schools. When you've worked with other school systems that did end up recommending consolidation, was that satisfaction level that, hey, my school is a good place to learn, was that satisfaction level significantly lower, so therefore you had a lot of room to grow with the concept of consolidation, like improve things?
So, two things on that. One, we asked those questions on this survey for two reasons. So 1A and 1B. Are there substantial differences between it? Do the students in one school system rank their system way more highly than students in the other school system? So it was a comparison piece, and that was to give us some breadcrumbs as to maybe there's something wrong in the areas we're asking about in one system versus the other system. Two, we generally find that those are good, really rough yardsticks. If there's a real crisis going on in a school system, the parents and the students will tell us via those questions, right? They'll tell us something's really, really wrong. And that's when we find out about, usually it's some sort of salacious personnel problem going on. And that leads to other things. Or there's a real financial crisis. The fact that they are really high is great. I think, though, that, in part two, those pieces are bound with what students and parents understand, right? It's their current lived experience. And their current lived experience is they're pretty happy with things. Those are the same people who came to the forums and said, we spend way too much money on that central office and education outcomes are terrible. Just not for my kid and my kid's school. It's kind of the general philosophy. And so we do take a look at the hard data. We don't use that as everybody says everything's great, everything must be great. We did take a look at how we're doing on EOCs, EOGs, and the academic performance. And member said, in general, we have challenges. Challenges remain. We have achievement gaps that are pernicious and persistent, and we need to figure out how to address those things.
Thank you.
I have a question about maps.
Yes, sir.
It's page 6-8, the boundary recommendations. You're talking about how the boundaries are confusing and how ACS doesn't overlap with the municipal limits of Asheville.
Yes, sir.
Can you give us 2 recommendations or possible solutions to that? My hunch is you give us 2 because one of them involves the legislature. When it comes to your second one, though, I think what you're saying is you're suggesting that we work together to allow everyone within the municipal limits of Asheville to choose which school system. And I guess I'm hoping you can opine on that, why you came to that recommendation, and what other than just eliminating confusion, which is a problem. Is there any other benefits from that tool?
I think that, so, I don't know why it's always 2-part answers in my head. But first, I think that one of the things that, the dream that charter brings with it, right, charter schools, is the idea of choice. And there's some good research out there that says simply the act of choosing makes them more engaged, right? So there's the idea of choice. ACS currently offers choice among its elementary schools. BCS has some programmatic options, but it doesn't have the same kind of true choice that ACS has. And so one of the ways to potentially, and then the second part to it is, we did find, residents who came to us who were completely confused about how the taxing situation worked out. There were people who came to us and said, I live in the city of Asheville, my kid's zoned for BCS, and I'm paying all this extra money. I'm like, no, but it is confusing. And I look at it from an outsider. If I were to come in and buy a house with the expectation, let's say I wanted to live in the city of Asheville, I wanted my kids to go to ACS, how am I supposed to know which house is going to come with ACS versus BCS? It is an unusual situation. I think also that, going back to what I said earlier, one of the reasons that the undertone, there are a couple different undertones for why consolidation comes up again and again in ACS and BCS. I think one of them is, though, that one is much larger than the other. And why is that? Swiss cheese. And so, yeah, one of the things that could be done would be to communicate much more transparently about how it all actually works and offer them a choice. Currently, the number of students tuition into ACS from various places, they're not paying the same tax rate as if I was next door and zoned for ACS, which, once it becomes more widely known, might be cause for concern. But offering true choice as a 2 school systems would be unique, innovative, and address this issue. The other way to do it would be to address the actual lines themselves.
Let's get a follow-up question to that.
Yes, ma'am.
In your perspective across the state, is eliminating confusion, should it be among our top 3 concerns? I mean, I guess I'm trying to get perspective. I hear what you're saying, but is that a reason to, of all the things that we could do, should that be one that's the top of our list? I'm just looking for perspective on.
I think that obviously it's not for me to presume what should be the priorities of any one of the bodies, ACS, BCS, or the county. I think that there was a level of exhaustion around the question of consolidation as we embarked on this study. Why is this coming around again? Comes around every 5 years, some people joked. And, looking at ways that would put a stake in the ground and end it. If the school systems were more equally sized, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. It is the fact that the loss of enrollment at both of them is more noticeable in ACS because it is smaller, but both are facing declining enrollment. If they were both more equally sized, would I be here? I would bet a quarter no.
As a follow-up to that as well, you've made the comment a couple times, I want to make sure I understand, that they're not more equally sized due to the Swiss cheese. And I think many of us were aware of the Swiss cheese, but I'd like to hear more what you mean. If there was a fix that was done to eliminate the Swiss cheese, could you tell us roughly what would be the student enrollment at each of these two districts?
I can offer you this. The population of ACS is of the city of Asheville, is about 94,000. The population zoned for ACS is 43,000. Right? But if we doubled the population zoned for ACS, you get to about a doubling of ACS.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's very helpful. And I think as a board member, the Swiss cheese to me applies in a few small pockets of like that map you showed us versus some areas of our city that go, what? If you look at
Yes.
the geography of our
Yes.
city, there's some places where for those kids way down south to be zoned into ACS, there's a little bit of logic there that says, maybe it makes more sense for our school district to be not covering all those legs, those two legs around Biltmore Forest. So could you address, would there be any new challenges if the ACS district suddenly became the exact border of the municipality?
There'd be any major change like that comes with a lot of challenges, right? So things that you would want to address, would you offer open choice enrollment at the elementary level district-wide in the new larger, now rather oddly shaped ACS? That would be an interesting discussion. Presuming that you would say, yes, we value that and we want to continue doing that, there might be some additional, it might be over and above transportation challenges with that. But I would argue that if families have chosen to go in that direction, they're accepting the additional time on the bus. And we've seen that in a number of places where the perception of a particular school being the key to my child's future life and happiness entails an additional 20, 30 minutes on the bus. We choose to do that willingly, and everyone is happy. So potential for that. I think that one of the things that makes this not an insurmountable problem, if it was done, is we already have school facilities. We're not talking about having to build new school facilities, right? So that's a huge cost that comes off the table. I think that combining all that, right-sizing your facilities and the attendance, staffing, and costs that go with that at the same time, right? So we could potentially handle some things like that.
I'm interested in hearing some about the other recommendations you made in the report. I think it was around the facilities, child nutrition, transportation. Could you elaborate on those, please?
Okay, so support services are the unglamorous but very necessary work of making sure that the magic in the classroom can potentially happen, right? And they are also areas that are relatively agnostic to particular educational philosophies or things that are, really specific to a school system. Transportation is one that we found that in other areas of North Carolina, where there is a city or a couple cities and a county system combined within a county, they have gone full shared services in the sense that they have one transportation director, and they manage those resources together. You already have a bit of an entree into that in that you are oddly enough forced to have only one garage, that is state mandate. And so we're already sharing some resources there. Potential comes out of that, maybe, in some efficiencies, at least at the office level. You're currently using two different routing systems. Personal opinion, one's way better than the other, so we might achieve some efficiencies there. Food services is an interesting area because ACS is outsourced its food services, largely according to what we learned on the back of it has been losing money for a number of years, so we are trying outsourcing it. It has not been outsourced for very long at this point. However, it's another area where shared services, could make a lot of sense. The BCS program is not having financial difficulties and could potentially take it over as a vendor, essentially, of the ACS Child Nutrition Program. Facilities is another one. This is where ACS's size is a little bit of a struggle. We were able to document that the facilities directors have been in closer collaboration than in the past in recent years. But this is a case where if you only have one plumber and there are toilets leaking in 5 schools, you still only have one plumber. So we're strength in numbers in the trades professions. Obviously, BCS has more of those personnel and staffing. And so that might be an area where you could enter into a joint agreement. A building is a building is a building. You could have differing philosophies on how often you're going to repaint buildings in ACS versus BCS, and the painters could just follow the different schedules, kinds of things. The room is well maintained, the heat is correct, the kids are at school to learn. Whether it's an ACS brand or a BCS brand doesn't matter as much. We look at it the same way as you don't care who makes the pencils, right? You just care that they're there, kind of thing. And I'm sorry, sir, you've raised your hand multiple times.
I have a couple comments and questions.
Yes, sir.
I prefer moth-eaten doiling to describe the district boundaries.
It's a good
It's
one.
something that I've been talking
good
about
one.
for a few years, and I was very happy that county staff were willing to add a layer. I would want something a little less traumatic than going from our current boundaries to full municipal boundaries overnight. But it's something that I've talked with many of you about, creating a pathway where some households can opt in and where we perhaps extend the Asheville City Schools District into some of the commercial corridors like Tunnel Road, because that'll increase revenue without disrupting enrollment in either system. I am aware that there isn't a lot in here about how charter schools access facilities. So my concern with trying to right-size our facilities would be that the charter schools would then have first claim to any facilities that we give up. And that could create a lot of chaos and actually increase the charter school capacity. I did want to ask you to expand on if we consolidated, you were talking about being on the same salary schedule, and so I'm not sure that that's clear to everybody what the impact of that would be.
Okay. So I can offer a little bit of historical perspective on the charter school piece. We worked with St. Louis Public Schools years ago. The substantial decline, refused to address their declining enrollment, and at the point we were working with them, they had put, I think, 30 or 35 schools up for sale in order to right-size their facilities. At that point, they specifically said, we're not selling to a charter school, and that was legal. I think that it is still a risk, right? Because you sell it to a local church turns around and starts their own charter school. Absolutely a possibility. It is, however, charter schools are public schools. They are an alternative option. And it is, the jury is out at this point as to whether or not what size charter schools end up, what is stasis in the system? 10 years from now, is it going to be 20% of kids are in charter schools, or is it going to be 2%? Jury is still really out on that. I've seen it swing back and forth. huge growth in charter schools in Florida in the early 2000s, and then a whole bunch of them went financially bankrupt overnight, closed their doors. Now there's much less enthusiasm for putting your kid in a charter school because you recognize the stability that comes from a school district that's been there for 200 years. So there is that piece. So the salary piece is something that we looked at hard. It is, how would you do this, right? And so page 526 points out the biggest first issue you would have with adopting a consistent salary and supplement schedule. And the reason we didn't put any hard numbers to this is because we don't presume to know how you're going to do something, right? You could decide, if the systems are consolidated, you could say, all right, we're consolidating, we're freezing everybody's salaries at exactly what they are right now for the next 2 years, just live with it. And, so in that case, you could have very different salaries and benefit, total compensation, okay? And so you could do that. American Airlines tried doing that in the early 1990s when they acquired some companies and came out of bankruptcy. Didn't end well for American Airlines, but that's an option. A more likely path would be that you would try to create a unified salary and supplement schedule. How would you work that out? Typically what you would do is you'd go position by position. You go, okay, position A is making this much over here in ACS, it's making this much over here in BCS, which one is higher? Okay, position A now makes the highest of those two. And you'd go down the line, and you would choose the highest at every point, right? The end result is going to be salary schedule that is higher than either one is now, okay? The other issue you have to address is the supplement issue. Each system takes a different approach to supplements. Exhibit 522, all ACS receive supplements that are based on years of service. This is classified and certified, all right? So teachers and non-teachers. BCS, different breakdowns, right? They have every 5 years, whereas ACS blocks and then 20 or more. So BCS has different gradations within supplements for teachers, essentially. And then their non-licensed employees have a straight percentage. That's different than what ACS does. What would likely happen in this situation? Depends on how things work out, but the more generous supplements for non-teachers is at the ACS level, right? They get whatever they are, and they start off at 11%, whereas BCS non-licensed employees are 10.77% throughout their career at BCS. So what would likely happen, you'd probably adopt the higher supplement schedule for non-licensed for sure.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitesides has had his hand up for some time.
I'm sorry.
I would like to make sure that he gets a question, but for the sake of staying on time with our agenda as well, let's let him have the last question. We'll move into Heather. And I've been reminded, not everyone speaks as loudly as I do. When you are speaking and asking questions, please speak up so that everyone can be heard.
That's not a
Commissioner
problem.
Whitesides. That's not a problem.
I have an observation and a question. I read your report twice. Not saying I agreed with all of it, but I read it twice. And my concern is this. When I see the buildings, we're not using them. Loss of students. Just one piece of that is to the charter schools this year. We paid checks for over 3,000 kids. 2,700 from Buncombe County, 500 and some from Asheville City Schools. When I look at the achievement gap, something I've been complaining about for 50 years now. What really gets me with that is, and I've talked to the people, the superintendents, everybody, but if we had that gap with white kids, it would have been solved 50 years ago. But because it's kids who look like me, we don't want to deal with it. The gorilla that's still in the room is racism. Now, the other thing I have too is finances. From the county, we are financing a third of our budget is going to public schools. But when I look at this and how inefficient it is now, we're paying for buildings that we can't afford. We can't afford to keep up. And when I read your report, within 4 or 5 years from now, this plane is gonna go over the cliff if we don't do something now. You know, forget about consolidation at this point, but my question is, shouldn't we be addressing the problems that I mentioned today? Because if not, folks, as a taxpayer, and I've been paying property tax probably longer than any of you in the room, because I was paying before a lot of you was born, really. We can't continue what we're doing now. So we can't bury our heads in the sand. But don't we have to do something now? It seems to me from reading this that we should have been doing something 10 years ago. But we're at the point now, we can't keep kicking the can down the road, folks. We've got to do something because it's our babies who are being affected by it. These kids are being messed over, and the kids who look like me, I see now why they're ending up in prison. Because if you're in a classroom and nobody pays you any attention, or they tell you, go sit in a corner, and you'll never be anything. No. The only way to go is public schools, as far as I'm concerned. But we've got to turn this ship around. And it's not only here. Let's forget about thinking about what others are doing. I have friends all over the country, and we talk about this. All public schools are in the same shape. Why? Because we don't want to deal with the problems that we need to deal with to turn the ship around. And if we're not willing to do that, as school boards and as county commission, we just need to dissolve the meeting now and go home. Because we are on a collision course, and this ship is going to sink. And one thing I learned in the Navy during Vietnam, you don't go down with the ship, you just get off. But what do you think? Do we need to deal with this now?
I respectfully agree with the commissioner that, you know, as the saying goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. It is a difficult thing for school systems to wrestle with declining enrollment. And I would say that, you know, looking at the numbers for Buncombe County, I know it doesn't feel this way, but this particular piece of geography is one of the lucky pieces. It looks like you will have some growth over the next 20 years in student enrollment. It's tiny. We have worked with other districts that did not do anything 20 years ago that are, you know, we recommended closing 39 schools in Houston. 10% of their building stock needed to go away, you know, tomorrow to right-size their ship. And so it is, that is an issue that will continue to impact everything that happens with the funding for education in Buncombe County for the next 20 years, probably. Absolutely. The other piece, the achievement gap, I think one of the positive things that is starting to happen in K-12 is the idea of equity and understanding what does equity mean. Equity means that, last week, that sometimes we have to do more to have that child be prepared for school than others. And you see this in now the funding for mental health that came out of, in large part, full recognition out of the COVID crisis. They can't learn if they don't get to school, right, because the bus didn't come. They can't learn if they're hungry. They can't learn if they're tired because they couldn't sleep last night at home. They can't learn if they're worried about violence in the schools. There are lots of preconditions for the magic in the classroom. And K-12 is recognizing that equity is important. But going back to your green comment, equity sometimes means we have to spend more money in certain areas than in other areas. And that is a difficult nut to crack. And so I agree that, you know, and speaking of K-12 as a whole, should we have figured out the achievement gap problem 20 years ago? Yes. And we have a lot of the knowledge to how to achieve it. But it is tough work, it is expensive work, and it is ongoing, continuous work. It's not, you know, build a building, okay, great, we're done. It is every child, every day, and every year. And so that is a struggle. You know, the question brought to us is, would consolidation fix the achievement gap? And you know, in the data that we have, the answer is no. By itself, consolidation does not fix the problem. And consolidation does not, in the absence of assuming that you're going to consolidate and then close 10 schools, the evidence does not show that consolidation is going to free up a substantial chunk of money that we could then redirect. It will free up some, yes, but I go back to the idea of physics and entropy. You know, school systems manage to make things work with $10. They manage to make things work with $100. You know, they use the resources they have available to do the best job that they can. And so, you know, if we contracted to one consolidated school system, would the savings be redirected specifically to where we think they are needed? Well, we put 10 K-12 experts in a room, they're gonna have 10 different ideas about where that money needs to go. And so no guarantee that the achievement gap is addressed through consolidation. It is unfortunately, I think, back to what I said earlier, it is the hard work that has to happen every day in the classroom that needs to be supported.
Dr. Preto, thank you so much.
The problem I have though with the achievement gap, when we talk about equity here, it's window dressing. We don't do anything. You know, I can talk about the achievement, what we need to do and all, we know that, but it's nothing but window dressing. And from what I hear, when we talk about the boundaries, everything that we're talking about that needs to be done, the only solution, folks, common sense. And you don't want to hear it, but it's consolidation. We need to tear down and rebuild the system the right way. And that's the only way. And you keep putting off the inevitable. Because if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to close the systems down, both of them.
Thank you, Commissioner Whitesides. Dr. Preto, many thanks to you, Prismatic Services, for the time that you've spent not only today, but leading up to today's report. As I've chatted with my commissioner colleagues and many members of the school board, the takeaway that I continue to hear was there was excellent data in this report that everyone will take back to use in making decisions moving forward, no matter what the legislature decides on our behalf. So many thanks to you and to Rachel Sawyer as well for helping lead this process from the staff perspective. Heather Parkinson is our strategy and innovation manager here in Buncombe County, and she is going to help moderate a larger discussion amongst the three boards. So thank you so much, Heather. And I realize there are a lot of questions. We could have probably spent the rest of the day answering questions. I would assume, let me say this, I would assume that if you have them and you direct them to your school board chair and superintendent, they can pass those forward so that we can all get those questions answered as we move forward. I hope that's okay for each.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I had the pleasure of leading a conversation with most of you in August. It's nice to see some familiar faces, but I'm Heather Parkinson. I work with the county, and my goal is processing of the information that was shared by Dr. Prieto. So what I have done in the past, I don't think we'll have enough time for. I'd love to get people in groups and really come up with some great ideas and conversation. But what we could do is maybe start on my left. And I'd like to ask you to just share with each of us something that stands out to you with the presentation or from the presentation. And then we'll go around the room.
So name tag says that I'm George Seaberg with Asheville City Schools Board. I first just want to thank Dr. Prieto and her staff what stood out to me was the deep methodology of this report. It is, in my opinion, extremely thorough. I appreciate that that in addition to the overarching recommendation, there are smaller recommendations contained within for each facet of each school district. And so the thing that stands out to me is, and it came up in a question earlier from Commissioner Wells, are things like what the two districts can be doing to better work together around transportation, around school nutrition. That one really stood out to me. School nutrition and other things that we could be sharing resources to be more efficient with the funds that we have. That's what stood out.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Commissioner Jennifer Horton. I'm still taking a lot in. So what stood out to me today was the Swiss cheese. I don't have no conclusions right now. I want to hear what everybody has to say.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
All right, I'm Amy Ray. I'm with the Asheville City Schools. I deeply appreciated the clarity, both of the ultimate recommendation and of sort of the subsidiary recommendations. I think that collaborate with the county schools and Buncombe County to problem solve both the Swiss cheese, but also the achievement gap issues, and how do those things intersect. I really feel like there's so much data in here for items fall on Dr. Furman and Dr. Jackson in part, in probably large part, but the ultimate recommendation that I think so many of us suspected that consolidation isn't the answer, actually. But that there are things short of consolidation that we can do to be fiscally more, to be better stewards.
Drew Ball, on the Buncombe County Commission. I will say, as the, I think, newest member in the room as of a couple weeks ago, this data is fantastic, and I learned a lot by reading through this. I'm really concerned about the long-term funding and what this says about, not just today, but the future of the county, and kind of the stagnant enrollment we're seeing there. And on page 5-32, there's some discussion around the state's private school voucher program. And the questions that I had, and as we kind of absorb what we're seeing here, how much is this impacting the stagnation, as the county grows, you have folks coming in, but our schools aren't growing, how that impacts long-term funding. And what really jumped out at me is that the state expects that the changes recently from House Bill 10 that expand the voucher program are going to result in a loss of 253 public school students countywide in 2024-25, and that's going to be a loss of $1.9 million in state funding in 2025-2026, combined with what else we're seeing around charter schools and homeschools, what we need to be doing to really create a more sound system looking ahead to ensure we have funds for our students.
Thank you. My name is Greg Cheatham. I'm from the Buncombe County School Board. And my main takeaway from this process is that this is an opportunity. Even though we were mandated to conduct the study, this is a chance for our school systems to learn from each other, learn a little bit more about each other. And consolidation aside, a chance for us to help all of the students that live in the city and the county. They're all our students. And I learned a lot from the study, like a lot of people. And I think it's important, like Mr. Whiteside said, to, take this moment again to really focus on a big problem, and that is the gap in achievement in our students that we both face. So the word opportunity comes up to me, a learning opportunity for all of us. So, thank you.
Yeah, opportunity.
My name is Judy Lewis. I serve on the school board with Buncombe County Schools. I have been an employee with both systems. I retired from Buncombe County and then had the opportunity to work with Asheville City for several years in the beginning teacher program. So I've seen the world from both sides now. You know that song, I'm sure. But I have seen really great things and wonderful people who work for both of our systems. And I love the word that you brought up, collaboration, and you did also in your report. And thank you for this mammoth undertaking. It's really good information, that some of which was brand new, and others that it kind of confirmed things that we already knew. But I think also it gives us the opportunity to build together, short of maybe the collaboration thing that would be so expensive and so upsetting for our students who have just come out of COVID and hurricane and other things, to kind of keep people in place and yet serve them to the best of our ability with the resources that we have, with the colleagues that we have on both sides who are very well-versed in what they're doing. They're talented, they're competent, and I feel like we could bring both these worlds together and help our precious students in both the worlds. I'll tell you, I have grandchildren in both systems, so I do have a dog in this fight. So I want to do, all of us to do everything we can to make it work, whatever we're mandated to do, whatever we see to choose to do together. So thank you.
I'm Charles Martin. I'm on the Buncombe County School Board, and I am the numbers guy. I like to look at finances. I like to look, because numbers actually will lead you to trends. It will show you things that might take place in the future. I don't look for the now. I'm looking 10 years ahead, looking 15 years ahead to see what would take place. And with the downfall of enrollment and the downfall of monies that could not be received by both school systems, I think in the future, we're going to look back, if we don't make the decision that's right for now for both school boards and for the county commissioners, that we will look back and say, did we make a mistake and damage every child's thing to do to merge transportation, to merge food services, to merge, because these are all operational points inside of any school system. And operation is the one department in any structured business that can bring a company down, because it takes money. It don't give money, it takes. And it absorbs all the money from everything that it needs to do. But the precious things that we have is, I got a son in school. I want him to get the best education here. I got a daughter that just left this school district, and the school told me that she got a good education. But as I see forward, as Drew is talking about, and as Whiteside is talking about, I'm 53 years old, went to Buncombe County Schools, and I am ashamed to say that I live in a school system 5 years ago. And that's a shame on us as a people. It's a shame on us as a county. It's a shame on us as a city. And it's a shame on us for every single person that's been on the school board previously to now. And it's a shame on every commissioner that's been on the commission in Asheville City until now, because it has shown that we are mismanaging the school system to address issues in the Black culture, to address issues in the Hispanic community, and to the Black and the brown people that we have in our community. But the future tells me, as I look at the numbers, we're gonna see a decline, and we're gonna have issues with funding, and it's gonna show both school systems that you need to collaborate more. And I think, as a person that been in operations all my life, that we need to suck it up and swallow our pride and say that I'm not worried about a title, because I'm not worried. I give up this position in a heartbeat. I tell people, you can have my position, because I don't have to have it if I don't need it. But I think on the operational side, Asheville City and Buncombe County need to come together and meet at that drawing board where I can give free food to all kids in Asheville City schools, because it is in Buncombe County. I can change transportation in Buncombe County because it's working successfully in Asheville. So neither one can say they're better than the other, because both of us are doing something that's good, that shows us that we can do it together. And it's a shame until now we have never collaborated as two school systems to make it better for every single child in this county. And that's the part that disturbs me when it comes down to this whole pragmatic thing. You kept me up all night, and I don't like being up all night. I even purchased a program in AI to start pulling information out, because I'm a data person. And my wife said, why are you spending money? But I want to know, and I want to find the best way to make it happen and make it work. But I do think it is time, as Mr. Whiteside said, it's time for us to come together, work as a team. And if we got to come together to reduce things, it's going to hurt, but it's going to be better for the future.
Commissioner Whiteside.
Back up and go in reverse.
Commissioner
Whiteside.
Well,
Okay. Well, yeah.
nothing's gonna change with me.
Thank you, Charles. what I took away from the study was that our two school systems, similar to what we found out last summer when you facilitated our last joint meeting, we have shared values. And what came out in the study that reflected that was that we are very student-focused. Both of our systems are primarily focused on student outcomes, student success, student well-being. We also have shared opportunities that were presented in the study. We've already heard about them. Achievement gaps across subgroups, various opportunities for operational efficiencies that could drive cost savings. And so when we have shared values and we have shared opportunities, that's right ground for the magic word of the day, which is called for in the report, which is collaboration. And so that's what I'm most interested in, is the next set of conversations is how do we structure that collaboration going forward to keep our focus on those shared values of student outcomes, but also go after those shared opportunities in a very efficient way. We've heard that equity work can be very expensive. We're facing budget constraints from likely all levels of government going forward. And so it's tough to be charged with solve the achievement gap, but we're going to take 20% away of your funding because things are local government. That's a challenge. But I think if we are well facilitated and we are collaborative, then we can solve these problems together. And even if funding does fall a little bit short, I do want to note one thing to work towards as well. If we're not going to wind up consolidating now, what can be helpful for the public and for us to understand as leaders is what are the triggers that would compel us to consolidate. Right now, the savings are less than 1%. If we found out 5 years from now that the savings went up to 5%, historically, does a 5% threshold in cost savings, what triggers a consolidation? If the perception of the both school systems, or one of the school system, like I said earlier, over 80% of the students and parents say we have a great school, it's a great place to learn with great. If like one of the school systems were to drop to 50%, what are those triggers that we should be looking out for if we move forward fully? What are some of those triggers that we can look out for so that at least we have some forward thinking and planning that we could work towards on that front? But all in all, magic words, collaboration. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm Amanda Edwards. I'm the chair of the Buncombe County Commission. As I previously mentioned, there is a lot of good data in this study. One takeaway for me was I was so impressed to see our students in both districts and how positively they felt about the schools that they attend. And a second takeaway was our staffs in both districts, by and large, felt that they were really good districts to work in. I think often as elected leaders at this table, we only hear the negative and we get caught in that echo chamber of what is wrong with our schools. And to hear firsthand and see the numbers that our students and the vast majority of our staff who were surveyed care deeply and love where they work and where they attend school, that was a big takeaway for me. Both districts, as we've all said, have positives. There's lots of areas for improvement. And I think we have an opportunity ahead of us to use the positives that each district brings to the table to strengthen both of our districts for every single student in them. One takeaway for me that was not necessarily shocking, but absolutely has to be addressed, is the lack of collaboration between the two school districts. I think during Hurricane Helene, we couldn't get our two school districts to even agree that they would both go back to school on the same day. And that, to me, has been further amplified by reading through this study, the opportunity for collaboration, that we could not decide that all of our kids should go back to school on the same day. We've got to do better. We have to do better for our kids. My last thing I'll say is, as elected leaders in this table, we have to set aside promises that we have made on the campaign trail. It's now time to shift into our policy and our governance work as elected leaders to address the challenges that our school district face, that we as county commissioners face in funding our schools, again, so that we can ensure that Asheville City and Buncombe County schools are a place for every student to thrive.
I'm Rebecca Streimer, I'm with Asheville City Schools, and I think what stood out to me is because the context that we're operating in is not going to become more supportive of traditional public schools. We're in a state where state leaders have made it clear the strategy that they're using around education. And as what that means for traditional public schools is sometimes terrifying to me. And so I look at this report and feel so much gratitude for the specificity here so that we can look at where to be economically more efficient for the sole reason that there are students that we're failing. Not for any other reason, not to save the county money, make things feel better. If the Swiss cheese needs to stick around so that we can put our attention on doing right by kids that we're letting behind, I'm fine with some Swiss cheese, if that's what it means. In the most efficient collaboration of two districts where the use of those efficiencies goes to the kids who need it most.
Excellent. I'm Martin Moore. I'm Buncombe County Commission. I think this is a challenging one because there's obviously more than one thing, as you're hearing from everybody so far. None of us have actually followed what you've asked, and I'm not going to either. But two that stood out to me, I think the words collaboration, efficiency, student success are going to come up for all of us. So without repeating a lot of great things that were said, I think there is a disconnect between what we see in the report for how our community perceives things to be going versus what the data is showing. And finding a way to excel at this collaboration piece might bridge that divide a little bit. And I think that would be really important because if people don't feel things are going the right direction, that person read the entirety of the report. But you need to fully understand what problems we're facing and how we can fix them. So that's a big piece for me of reconciling those two things because I do think the perception matters a lot. And the second part for me, I've never, until local government, never really operated in a space, either as an attorney, public-private practice, where we're looking at things at a year-by-year basis. I don't plan policy based on year by year. I don't budget what my firm does year by year to how budget years work. We could teach a seminar on how long it takes to pass a budget. But I think the reality for us is thinking about this in longer terms, whether that's having an aspirational goal for 2 years or having a 5-year aspirational goal of what we'd like to accomplish, not just for consolidation, but for the cost savings. All the things that are showing up in here are things we can think beyond a year-by-year kind of approach. And I think it does take a lot more collaboration than we currently have right now, but working towards a plan that addresses more than a year-by-year analysis of this would be really helpful, given I am hearing from my fellow commissioners and school board members that this has been a problem for decades, well before I was doing anything other than sitting in elementary school at the time. So I think if we can approach that with that kind of mindset of how are we planning out so that the next iteration of commission or school board 25 years from now isn't dealing with this exact same problem, that would be great.
My name is Jesse Warren from Asheville City School. I'm more of a hand for us to see a bunch of kids of all colors from Buncombe County and Asheville City School playing and try to figure out how we're going to get them to graduate together all in one level. Since the consolidation recommendation is over now, we can relax a little bit. Can both school boards get together as parents, just as people, and see what is the main thing for these here to graduate from high school each and every year, and what's the best thing for them? Forget about where they live, forget about the money and everything else. Let's see what we can do for those kids right there as a whole for Buncombe County and Asheville City Schools. If we can do that, our problem may be solved, as in most of the issues that we have today.
Well, Kim Clemens, I'm with the Buncombe County Board of Education. I learned a lot, and there were some surprises. There were things that I really wasn't surprised about. The collaboration piece stood out, obviously, and I'm typically a positive person, and what I would say is I think that work has been started. Rebecca and I, we talk quite often, and so I know there's some things that we're doing already. Is there more work to do? Absolutely. you know, when I started reading this, I was focused on the schools and whether or not, you know, it was the right thing to do from a consolidation of the two districts, but didn't think about there's some efficiencies that we can look outside of that, transportation, child nutrition, and other things. So, to Jesse's point, I think it's important for us to really talk about what are the things that we can do to help with those efficiencies. The other thing, and the Swiss cheese things, I get a little riled up, and I'm gonna tell you why. I've lived here all my life in the county. I live in the Emma district, which is part of Asheville City now. So things have changed. The Asheville city limits has changed. And so I'm like, okay, the closest school that I have is Emma Elementary. I could almost walk there. I wouldn't, but I could. And I would hate for us to do something different there because there's been a lot of annexation of places within the city. The other thing that has changed a lot since I was in school is having multilingual students. And that is something that I'm really focused on from an equity standpoint. I think we say we look at equity, but I think both systems say that and the achievement gap. But I think this study is going to force us to really do that now. Because I think we say it, it's a buzzword. Last thing that I think the schools are working very hard to improve achievement gaps and all those things. The surprise for me, which maybe I'm the only one in the room, but I was surprised that you said that you don't recommend consolidation. I felt through all my life it's been discussed, and it's discussed whether we're doing a survey or a study. It always comes up, but I think this is with the data that you provided, and thank you so much for all the data you provided. I know it was a lot of work for the two systems, but it was very, very good information for us to have. But I was a little surprised of the recommendation.
What's the question? What scares me?
I'm simply giving you the opportunity to share what stands out to you.
Yeah, I hadn't thought too much about the Swiss cheese until this morning, but looking at that map of Georgianized Street reminded me that that's, you know, that level of confusion and nonsense is not good government, it's bad government, and it gives the people in our society who are lazy and loud ammunition to throw at government and say that it's bad. And I would argue one of our main jobs as elected officials is to allow those people to have no ammunition and to only make up things to talk bad about government. So I hope we can fix that. I hope this is an opportunity for us to look at ways to right-size the various high school districts and to fix the maps a little bit here and there if we can. I've thought a lot about that over the last week, and I'm very interested in talking to you guys about what your thoughts are about the maps and the districts and how that overlaps with the challenge of the facilities as the population ages. The other thing that stood out to me, you know, I think since we've got these two new superintendents in the last few years, our level of attention and commitment to student recruitment and talking up our school systems has gotten a lot better. I feel a lot better about that. I think there's a lot of people in this room, maybe not me, a lot of people in this room who think a lot about that and work on that, but whatever level of effort we're doing today, I think we need to double it. Student recruitment is, I think, a huge challenge as a parent of a six-year-old and a 4-year-old. I can tell you that the level of choice parents already have is overwhelming. They don't have the foggiest idea what to do or what's best to do. They certainly don't know what the budget or taxpayer consequences are of their decisions. That probably shouldn't be in the top 3 things they worry about, but I think we should do a little bit better to make it in the top 10. And I think we should continue to work on student recruitment and working on how we can work together as it relates to fixing the maps as well as the quantity of facilities we have.
I'm Liza Kelly. I'm with the Asheville City School Board. I'm intrigued by the consideration of alternatives to our current district boundaries. That's going to require some more contemplation on all of our parts. But my biggest takeaway was, again, as it's been said and said again, the idea of collaborating and streamlining the systems that are working, and to do that at every turn, to allow all of us to work together and do the job that we are here to do, which is to educate each and every one of the children that we are here to serve, and to instill in them a love of learning, and to hold themselves to a high standard of excellence, and to dream big for their futures. If we can streamline our systems to make that part a little bit easier, I think that's a good move.
I'm Ann Franklin. The frog came to town today. I apologize. I'm with Buncombe County Schools. I do appreciate the document, and because I come with instruction as a focus for me, I was very impressed in the comparison with Buncombe County and Asheville City and how we prepare our students and the similarities that we have. And all of these other entities, these issues, they bubble to the top. But to me, the foundation is the fact that we are, in both systems, doing our best to educate our students as to a high quality. And I appreciate that.
I'm Terry Wells, Buncombe County Commissioner, and I do appreciate all the data. There was a lot of really good information in there. And part of the takeaway for me is, with the recommendation of not consolidating, but the importance of us really making a concerted effort to work together and have a vision for our entire county, which includes both of our school districts, and where we're going, because, right, by doing that, it strengthens. Education is such a key component to uplifting our community, improving our economic development, all of that. And so it's, our future basically is dependent on this. And so I really feel it's incumbent upon us to work together to strengthen this, and also looking at, right, how we can do that through that collaboration, through those shared services. And the achievement gap, we've got to see how we prioritize the funding, because when you look at some of this data, it clearly shows that just having more funding does not necessarily address the achievement gap.
Thank you. I am Sarah Thornburg with the Asheville City School Board. My takeaway is one of a silver lining, because as you identified, we didn't ask for this. We didn't want it. I was certainly in the camp of, I thought it was a diversion and a waste of resources, and I'm really surprised at how useful it is. And this report and this conversation reflects issues we have. We have issues of racism. We have fiscal responsibility issues. And we are all charged now with collaborating. I will share, as the new chair of the Asheville City School Board, that Bob Elliott reached out to me as chair of the Buncombe County School Board. Amanda has reached out as chair of the Buncombe County Commissioners, and we've met. And there is a real desire to collaborate. And so I think this will not be the end of the conversation. And as Greg said, it is an opportunity, and we'd be ashamed to squander it. So for something we didn't want, I'm pretty grateful that it's going to start some good conversations.
I'm Pepe Acebo. I'm with the Asheville City Schools Board of Education. The things that stand out to me, yes to everything that's been said before, What surprised me was the amount of research literature that points to a 5,000 student or a 6,000 student district being the turning point for any economies of scale, and that you really don't see a benefit in the literature of merging a district the size of Asheville City Schools with a larger district. And so that's one of the things that I'm really taking away from this.
So I get to be last.
You do.
So I'm Amy Churchill with Buncombe County Schools Board. And collaboration, so we'll just get that out of the way. I've always been, you have to work together in order to improve patient lives. And then the other thing, I guess the surprise of all of that is that we are, the two school systems are more alike than not with regard to our student success and our achievement gap. That's not what you see on social media. So again, social media warriors and the perception. So that was a bit of a surprise. To speak to the achievement gap, I just couldn't leave it as the schools need to do something about the achievement gap. Because I do think that we are letting a very important group off the hook. And so what are we going to do? If we're collaborating, we also need to collaborate with the county as to what do we do to make our families' lives easier, or give them opportunities, educational tools, whatever. Maybe they can't even read. I mean, we'll probably have to start back there with some people. What are we going to do as a county? Because you can't just put it back on the school systems. They only have them for 7 hours a day. And that's my ending.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for chiming in and sharing your thoughts. We are out of time, but I do want to just share with you all what I heard the most from each of you was the collaboration piece. So I don't want to move to a break without just leaving that lingering thought with you all. What does that really look like? How do you make sure that you carry this work forward? I also heard you talk about shared values, that you collectively agree on your shared values, that student outcomes and education come first. So leaving you with those thoughts, and I believe Rachel is going to talk about some quick next steps, and then we'll have a break for 15 minutes.
Good morning, Rachel Sawyer here. For 15 months since we first received the legislation from the General Assembly. So quickly before next steps, want to say thank you to the 3 organizations, Buncombe County Schools, Asheville City Schools, Buncombe County Government, as well as the members of the local project team that got together and provided some scoping and shaping for what a successful study would look like as we carry this out. And to Prismatic Services, we asked for a study that would be grounded in, that would be comprehensive and rigorous, grounded in data, focused on equity, inclusive of community engagement boards respond to this report if desired. So not required by law. We can submit just the report and complete our objectives. If the Board of Commissioners or either school board wishes to comment on and include, we would be happy at Buncombe County as staff to attach that with our submission to the General Assembly, if that's the desire of one or more of those elected boards. So that's a task for the chairs to talk with members of your boards about whether or not there's desire to convene an agenda item at a meeting. Each of you should have a meeting between now and then in which you could conduct that business, should that be your desire. And as staff, we will stand ready for any of those updates and be sure to get this report to the hands of the state and close the project from our perspective in terms of the facility study to help your boards as you carry out the additional next steps that Heather just summarized for you. Questions?
Actually, Rachel, one question. When you finally submit this to the General Assembly, this is a nitpicky question, but does it just go to the General Assembly or does it go into the hands of a specific person in the General Assembly?
There is a specific subcommittee that is mentioned that it should go to, and I don't have the legislation in front of me. If somebody does and wants to call it out, it's within the group that was hearing election matters. So it was this, basically the section of the General Assembly that it had originally emanated from, it will go back to, and our public policy contact has provided us an email address at NCLEG that we will submit it to. So I don't know the name of the persons that will monitor and receive it as it is submitted. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And we do have a 15-minute break, so let's return at 10 after 11. Just put us a few minutes behind. Sorry about that, John, but we will reconvene at 10 after 11. Thank you.